The Fatimid architecture that developed in the Fatimid Caliphate of North Africa combined elements of Eastern and Western architecture, drawing on Abbasid architecture, Byzantine and Coptic architecture and North African traditions. It bridged early Islamic styles and the medieval architecture of the Mamluks, introducing many innovations. The wealth of Fatimid architecture was found in the main cities of Mahdia, Al-Mansuriya and Cairo, the heartland of architectural activity and expression during Fatimid rule was at al-Qahira, the old city of Cairo, on the eastern side of the Nile, where many of the palaces, mosques and other buildings were built. Al-Aziz Billah is generally considered to have been the most extensive of Fatimid builders, credited with at least 13 major landmarks including the Golden Palace, the Cairo Mosque, a fortress, a belvedere, a bridge and public baths. The Fatimid caliphs competed with the rulers of the Abbasid and Byzantine empires, and indulged in luxurious palace building. The palaces, their greatest architectural achievements, are known only by written descriptions. However, several surviving tombs, mosques, gates and walls, mainly in Cairo, retain original elements, although they have been extensively modified or rebuilt in later periods. Notable extant examples of Fatimid architecture include the Great Mosque of Mahdia and the Azhar Mosque, Al-Hakim Mosque, Juyushi and Lula of Cairo. Although heavily influenced by architecture from Mesopotamia and Byzantium, the Fatimids introduced to develop unique features such as the four-centered keel arch and the squinch, connecting square interior volumes to the dome. The mosques followed the hypo-style plan, where a central courtyard was surrounded by arcades with the roofs usually supported by keel arches, initially resting on columns with leafy Corinthian capitals. They typically had features such as portals that protrude from the wall, domes above mihrabs and qiblas, and facade ornamentation with iconographic inscriptions and stucco decorations. The woodwork of the doors and interiors of the buildings was often finely carved. The Fatimids also made considerable development towards mausoleum building. The mashhad, a shrine that commemorates a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, was a characteristic type of Fatimid architecture. 3 Fatimid-era gates in Cairo, Bab al-Nasser, Bab al-Fatah and Bab Zuwaylah, built under the orders of the Vizier Badr al-Jamali, have survived. Though they have been altered over the centuries, they have Byzantine architectural features with little trace of the Eastern Islamic tradition. Recently, a neo-Fatimid style has emerged, used in restorations or in modern Shia mosques by the Dawoodi Bohra, which claims continuity from the original Fatimid architecture. Background. Origins. The Fatimid Caliphate originated in an Ismaili Shia movement launched in Al-Salamiyya on the western edge of the Syrian desert, by Abd Allah al-Akbar, acclaimed 8th-generation descendant of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, through the prophet's daughter Fatima. In 899 his grandson, to be known as Abd Allah al-Mahdi, became leader of the movement. He fled from his enemies to Sijilmasa in Morocco, where he proselytized under the guise of being a merchant. He was supported by a militant named Abu Abd Allah al-Shi'i, who organized a Berber uprising that overthrew the Tunisian Aghlabid dynasty, and then invited al-Mahdi to assume the position of Imam and Caliph. The empire grew to include Sicily and to stretch across North Africa from the Atlantic to Libya. The Fatimid caliphs built 3 capital cities, which they occupied in sequential order: Mahdia and Al-Mansuriya in Africa and Cairo in Egypt. Ifriqiya. Mahdia was a walled city located on a peninsula that projected into the Mediterranean from the coast of what is now Tunisia, then part of Ifriqiya. The Carthaginian port of Zella had once occupied the site. Mahdia was founded in 913 by Abdullah al-Mahdi Billah, the first Fatimid imam, and later was the port from which the Fatimid invasion of Egypt was launched. Al-Mahdi built the Great Mosque of Mahdia, the earliest Fatimid mosque, in the new city. The other buildings erected nearby at that time have since disappeared, but the monumental access gate and portico in the north of the mosque are preserved from the original structure. Al-Mansuriya, near Cairo, Tunisia, was the capital of Fatimid Caliphate during the rules of the Imams Al-Mansuriya and Al-Muwahhidin. Built between 946 and 972, it was a circular walled city holding elaborate palace surrounded by gardens, artificial pools and water channels. The Caliph Al-Muwahhid moved from the city to the new city of al-Qahira in 973, but Al-Mansuriya continued to serve as the provincial capital. In 1057 it was abandoned and destroyed. Any useful objects or materials were scavenged during the centuries that followed. Today only faint traces remain. Egypt. The Fatimid general Jafar al-Sikili built a new palace city near to Fustat upon conquering Egypt in 969, which he at first called Al-Mansuriya after the capital in Tunisia. When Al-Muwahhid arrived in 973, the name was changed to Al-Qahira. The new city incorporated elements of the design of Al-Mansuriya, although it was rectangular rather than circular in plan. Both cities had mosques named Al-Azhar after the Prophet's daughter, Fatima al-Azhar, and both had gates named Bab al-Fatah and Bab Zuwayr. Both cities had two palaces, for the Caliph and for his heir, opposite and facing each other. Al-Aziz Billah is generally considered to have been the most extensive of Fatimid builders, aided in part by funds generated through his father Al-Muwahhid's tax reforms. Al-Aziz is credited with at least 13 major building works during this reign from 975 until his death, including the Golden Palace, the Cairo Mosque, a fortress, a belvedere, a bridge and public baths. His mother, Durzan, widow of Al-Muwahhid, was also responsible for ordering the commencement of building projects, mainly in the Narafa area, ordering construction of the second mosque in Cairo, Jami al-Narafa Mosque, in 975. Similar to the first mosque, Al-Azhar Mosque, it had some 14 gates but was later destroyed by fire, leaving only its green mihrab. Durzan is also credited with ordering construction of the Narafa Palace, a public bath, cistern, or pool, and a royal garden and hydraulic pump for the Abu el-Malam fortress. She also ordered a well to be built in the courtyard of Ibn Tulun Mosque in 995, a pavilion overlooking the Nile called Manazil-al-Iz, and her own mausoleum in Narafa. Badr al-Jamali was also a noted builder, sponsoring numerous state architectural projects and restoration works during his rule from 1074 to 1094, particularly with mosques, restoring minarets in Upper Egypt and building mosques in Lower Egypt. He also built many of the gates and fortifications in Cairo. Architectural style. According to R.M. Lapidus, public architecture under the Fatimids was an extension of the ceremonial aspects of the royal court, and was also intricately made. Fatimid architecture drew together decorative and architectural elements from the east and west, and spanned from the early Islamic period to the Middle Ages, making it difficult to categorize. The architecture that developed as an indigenous form under the Fatimids incorporated elements from Samarra, the seat of the Abbasids, as well as Coptic and Byzantine features. Most early buildings of the Fatimid period were of brick, although from the 12th 12th century onward, stone gradually became the chief building material. The Fatimids combined elements of Eastern and Western architecture, drawing on Abbasid, North African, Greek and indigenous Coptic traditions, and bridged between the early Islamic styles and medieval architecture of the Mamluks. The Fatimids were unusually tolerant of people with different ethnic origins and religious views, and were adept at exploiting their abilities. Thus, many of the works of Fatimid architecture reflect architectural details imported from northern Syria and Mesopotamia, probably in part due to the fact that they often employed architects from these places to construct the buildings. Fatimid architecture in Egypt drew from earlier Tulunid styles and techniques, and used similar types of material, while also consciously adhering to Abbasid architectural concepts. The architecture is more influenced by Mediterranean cultures and less by Iranian, while Fatimid architecture followed traditional plans and aesthetics. It differed in architectural details such as the massive portals of some mosques and their elaborate facades. Scholars such as Dogan Cuban described Fatimid architecture as inventive more in decoration than in broad architectural concept, although he acknowledges that the Fatimids contributed to a distinct style of mosque. The Fatimids introduced or developed the usage of the four-centrade keel arch and the Muqarnas squinch, a feature connecting the square to the dome. The Muqarnas squinch was a complex innovation. In it a niche was placed between two niche segments, over which there was another niche. It is possible that this design had Iranian inspiration. A similar system was applied to window building. According to de Lacy O'Leary, the horseshoe arch was developed in Egypt under Fatimid rule and is not of Persian origin as is commonly thought. Palaces. The palaces of the caliphs, their greatest architectural achievements, have been destroyed and are known only from written descriptions. The heartland of architectural activity and expression during Fatimid rule was at Al-Qahira, on the outskirts of Cairo on the eastern side of the Nile, where many of the palaces, mosques and other buildings were built. The caliphs competed with the rivals of the Abbasid and Byzantine empires, and were known to indulge in furnishing the palaces with extraordinary splendor. The palaces had gold rafters to support the ceilings, and caliphs typically asked for a golden throne encased with a curtain similar to those of the rulers of the Abbasids and Byzantines. Furniture and ceramics were elegantly adorned with motifs of birds and animals which were said to bring good luck, and depictions of hunters, and musicians and dancers of the court which reflected the exuberance of Fatimid palace life. Fountains were installed in the palaces to cool the atmosphere. Mausoleums. The mashhad is a characteristic type of Fatimid building, a shrine that commemorates a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. The tombs of the Fatimid caliphs were also treated as shrines. Most of the mashhads were straightforward square structures with a dome, but a few of the mausoleums at Aswan were more complex and included side rooms. During the rule of Al-Hafiz, several mausoleums and mosques were rebuilt to honor notable female figures in Shia history. The caliphs also built tombs for the wives and daughters. Most of the Fatimid mausoleums have either been destroyed or have been greatly altered through later renovations. The Mashhad al-Juyushi, also called Mashhad Badr al-Jamali, is an exception. This building has a prayer hall covered with cross vaults, with a dome resting on squinches over the area in front of the mihrab. It has a courtyard with a tall square minaret. It is not clear whom the mashhad commemorates. Two other important mashhads from the Fatimid era in Cairo are those of Sayyida Ruqayya and Yahya al-Shabib, in the Fustat cemetery. Sayyida Ruqayya, a descendant of Ali, never visited Egypt, but the mashhad was built to commemorate her. It is similar to al-Juyushi, but with a larger, fluted dome and with an elegantly decorated mihrab. Mosques. The plan and decoration of Fatimid mosques reflect Shiite doctrine in that the mosques were often used for royal ceremonial purposes. The characteristic architectural styles of Fatimid mosques include portals that protrude from the wall, domes above mihrabs and qiblas, porches and arcades with keel-shaped arches supported by a series of columns, facade ornamentation with iconographic inscriptions and stucco decorations. The mosques followed the hypostyle plan, where a central courtyard was surrounded by arcades with the roofs usually supported by keel arches, initially resting on columns with Corinthian capitals. The arches held inscription bands, a style that is unique to Fatimid architecture. The later columns often had a bell-shaped capital with the same shape mirrored to form the base. The prayer niche was architecturally more elaborate, with features such as a dome, a transept. The Fatimid architects built modified versions of Coptic keel-arched niches with radiating fluted hoods, and later extended the concept to fluted domes. The woodwork of the doors and interiors of the buildings was often finely carved. Early Fatimid mosques such as the Mosque of the Narafa did not have a minaret. Later mosques built in Egypt and in Africa incorporated brick minarets which were probably part of their original designs. These were derived from early Abbasid forms of minaret. Minarets later evolved to the characteristic mabkara shape, where a lower rectangular shaft supported an octagon section that was capped by a ribbed helmet. Almost all of Cairo's Fatimid minarets were destroyed by an earthquake in 1303. Some floating mosques were located above shops. For the first time, the facade of the mosque was aligned with the street and was elaborately decorated. The decorations were in wood, stucco and stone, including marble, with geometrical and floral patterns and arabesques with Samaritan and Byzantine origins. The decorations were more complex than the earlier Islamic forms and more carefully adapted to structural constraints. The imposing architecture and decoration of Fatimid buildings such as the Al-Hakim Mosque provided a backdrop that supported the dual role of the Fatimid Caliph as both religious and political leader. Great Mosque of Mahdia. The Great Mosque of Mahdia was built in Mahdia, Tunisia, in 916 CE, on an artificial platform reclaimed from the sea, as mentioned by the Andalusian geographer al-Bakri. After the founding of the city in 909 by the first Fatimid Imam, Abdullah al-Mahdi Billah, internally, the Great Mosque had a layout similar to other mosques in the region. A transverse aisle paralleled the Qibla wall, with 9 aisles at right angles to the transverse. The original Qibla wall was destroyed by sea erosion and had to be rebuilt, reducing the size of the prayer hall. Like other mosques in the region, the orientation of the Qibla differs significantly from the true Great Circle route to Mecca. Unlike other North African mosques, the Great Mosque did not have minarets, and had a single imposing entrance. This is the first known example of a projecting monumental porch in a mosque, which may have been derived from the architecture of secular buildings. The mosque at Ajdabiya in Libya had a similar plan, although it did not have the same monumental entrance. Like the Mahdia Mosque, for the same ideological reasons, the Ajdabiya Mosque did not have minaret. Al-Azhar Mosque. The Al-Azhar Mosque was commissioned by the Caliph al-Mu'azzid Allah for the newly established capital city of Cairo. Its name is a tribute to the name of Fatima al-Azhar, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. Jafar al-Sikili, commander of the Fatimid army, started construction of the mosque in 970. It was the first mosque established in the city. The first prayers were held there in 972, and in 989 the mosque authorities hired 35 scholars, making it a teaching center for Shia theology. A waqf for the mosque was established in 1009 by Caliph al-Hakim. The Al-Azhar Mosque in Cairo seems to have had a similar projecting entrance to the Great Mosque of Mahdia. The original building had an open central courtyard with 3 arcades. Its layout was similar to the Cairo and Samarra mosques. These had round arches on pre-Islamic columns with Corinthian capitals. There were 3 domes, 2 at the corners of the Qibla wall and 1 over the prayer niche, and a small brick minaret over the main entrance. The gallery around the courtyard had series of columns, and the prayer hall, which had the domes built over it, had 5 more rows of 5 pillars. Minor alterations were made by the Caliphs al-Hakim by Amr Allah in 1009 and al-Amir by Hakim Allah in 1125. The Caliph al-Hafiz made significant further changes, adding a 4th arcade with keel arches, and a dome with elaborate carved stucco decorations in front of the transept. Since then, the mosque has been greatly enlarged and modified over the years. Of the original building little remains other than the arcades and some of the stucco decoration. Mosque of the Narafa. An unusually detailed description of the Mosque of the Narafa in Cairo, built by 2 noble women in 976, has been left by the historian Al-Qahira, who died around 1062 to 1065. He said, "This mosque had a lovely garden to its west and a cistern. The door by which one enters has large mastabas. The middle is under the high minaret, which has iron sheets on it, for the door right up to the mihrab in the Mansoura. It has 14 square doors of baked brick. In front of all the doors is a row of arches. Each arch rests on 2 marble columns. There are 3 sufu, is carved in relief and decorated in blue, red, green and other colors, and in certain places painted in a uniform tone. The ceilings are entirely painted in polychrome. The intrados and the extrados of the arcades supported by columns are covered with paintings of all different colors. It seems probable from this description that the mosque had a portal that projected from the wall, as did the earlier Great Mosque of Mahdia. In other respects it seems to have resembled the Al-Azhar Mosque in layout, architecture and decoration. Although the geographers Al-Muqaddasi and Ibn Hawqal both praised this mosque, neither left specific descriptions of this or any other mosque. Thus Ibn Hawqal says of it only that it is one of the mosques distinguished by the spaciousness of its court, elegance of construction, and the fineness of its ceilings. Al-Hakim Mosque. The Al-Hakim Mosque is named after Imam al-Hakim by Amr Allah, the 3rd Fatimid Caliph to rule in Egypt. Construction of the mosque started in 990. In 1002-3 Caliph al-Hakim ordered completion of the building. The southern minaret has an inscription with his name and the date of 393. Significant changes were made to the minarets in 1010. At first the mosque was outside the city walls, but when Badr al-Jamali rebuilt the walls he enclosed a larger area, and the north wall of the mosque became part of the new stone city wall. The mosque was badly damaged in the 1303 earthquake, and suffered further damage in later years. By the 19th century it was ruined, but has since been reconstructed. The mosque is an irregular rectangle with 4 arcades that surround the courtyard. As with the Ibn Tulun Mosque, the arches are pointed and rest on brick piers. It resembles the Al-Azhar Mosque in having 3 domes along the Qibla wall, 1 at each corner and 1 over the mihrab. Also, like Al-Azhar, the prayer hall is crossed by a transept at right angles to the Qibla. This wide and tall central aisle leading to the prayer niche borrows from the Mahdia mosque's design. The Al-Hakim Mosque differs from the Al-Azhar and Byzantine mosques in having two stone minarets at the corners of the stone facade, which has a monumental projecting portal like the Mosque of Mahdia. Other Cairo mosques. The Lula Mosque, located in the southern cemetery of the Mokattam Hills, was built in 1015–16 during the reign of the third Caliph al-Hakim. The mosque was built on a promontory of limestone and consisted originally of a three-story tower-like structure built over a rectangular plan. It exhibited typical aspects of the Fatimid architectural style, with portals with slight protrusions, mihrabs and qibla walls, several domes, and columned porches with triple arches or keel-shaped arches. The mosque partially collapsed in 1919, but was later refurbished in 1998 by the Dawudi Boras. The Juyushi Mosque was built by Badr al-Jamali, the Emir al-Juyush of the Fatimids. The mosque was completed in 1085 under the patronage of the then Caliph and Imam Mahdi al-Mustanzir Billah. It was built on an end of the Mokattam Hills, which would ensure a view of the Cairo city. The Azhar Mosque was built in the under Vizier al-Ma'mun al-Bataihi during the Caliphate of Imam al-Amir by Arqami Allah. The mosque is located on North Muiz Street. It is notable for its facade, which is elaborately decorated with inscriptions and geometric carving. It is both the first mosque in Cairo to have such decoration, and also the first to have a facade which follows the line of the street, built at an angle to the rectangular hypostyle hall, whose orientation is dictated by the Qibla direction.